I'm Megan.
I'm CJ.
And I'm Erika.
And this is the Her Podcast.
It's a family affair today, pals. Okay, it's Erika in case you didn't catch that yet. But I am so excited because we're welcoming my dad to the podcast, Milton. Milton has 34 years of experience in the education system as a teacher, principal, teacher representative, and mediator. He has years of experience in conflict resolution. I mean, it obviously started because he has like 4 kids. And implementing effective communication. Again, I would attribute a lot of that to the practice he probably got at home with us. We talk with my dad about conflict resolution, communication tools, and the importance of values and lifestyle alignment. I'm really excited for this one, you guys, because if you've been following along and you hear some of my really good nuggets of like advice or knowledge, it's always from my dad. So I would highly recommend getting your notes app out or like a notebook with a pen because I can promise you he's going to drop some good ones today. Turn it up. Here we go. Let's have some fun.
So how often do you do this?
Once a month.
So it's only once a month.
But we record at least 4 episodes every month.
Sometimes 5.
So we did 2 yesterday, and then we do 2
We're
today.
efficient.
Yeah.
Because she's only out once a month.
So I make them jam it all in there.
So we jam it all together.
Wow. It's a big jam.
So we don't see each other for a while and then we are just thrown in a room together.
Yeah. Have a go, eh?
Yeah.
That's good.
I have a real important question with you that I think, everyone wants to know.
Oh, nice.
I'm
I for
so
sure do.
curious
Okay.
to hear what you think.
About?
What was Erika like as a child?
Oh my goodness. I gotta tell you. So, first of all, today is a pretty important day, right? Like this is International Women's Day.
It is.
And here I am sitting with some pretty amazing women. And it does not escape me that there are some remarkable women in my life, not the least of which is one sitting here.
Exactly.
But her mother is, quite honestly, even more amazing.
She really is,
and
though.
honestly, like, why am I here? You should be talking to her mother because that is an interview. I got to tell you,
I don't
there's a
think
story
Mom
to
would
be
want to
told.
come on.
Did you
No,
hear
she
that,
wouldn't.
Kelly?
No, Mom's very private.
Well, that's the problem because, some of these people have stories that are worth telling.
Yeah.
And they need to be told because they'll be such a source of encouragement for another person.
Yeah.
And then the other mother, of course, the other woman that I would give a shout out to is my mom. I mean, she's going to be 99 in April.
What a legend.
99. Like 99. And she still has all her wits about her.
Oh, yeah.
Recently lost my dad,
Yes.
who was 97, but mom, grandma, great grandma. So, yeah, happy International Women's Day to
That
you.
was very
amazing
nice.
women.
Thank you,
That was so
Milton.
That was
Keep,
so nice.
Keep rocking it.
You didn't-
Officially our favorite guest
I
thus
know, that
far.
was so kind.
Well, that was easy.
But you didn't answer what I was like as a child.
Well,
Yeah.
listen.
I said you wouldn't remember.
No, I do remember. First of all, I took a lot of pictures of the older kids. And
what
so
always
by
happens.
the time Erika came along, it was like, yeah, she's cute as a button. And she really was. And in fact, I have the most darling picture of her, which is still one of the favorite ones where you're in the snow and you're wearing that pink toque. Yeah, like so cute.
Pink even back then.
Yeah.
Thank you, even back
Yeah.
then.
Yeah.
Always on brand.
True. But a very energetic. I think all you'd have to do is put her into what's that movie about the Honey I Shrunk the Kids?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like she would just be this but smaller. True story.
Mini.
So
Aw.
yeah, like bouncing around, full of energy, really loving, and I know that she's a highly dependent person. She's not independent, and I mean I could do a workshop just telling you about.
All 4 of your children?
Yeah, like they're all very different and just wonderful kids, adults turned into real people, of whom I'm very proud. But Erika was one of these ones who needed a hug every day. Like just needed to know that she was loved. So that affirmation stuff all the time. Her older sister, Alex, was one of those ones that I know you love me. If it changes, let me know. And,
different.
well, it's so true. You know,
Yeah.
I can remember one time dropping them off at the school, And they're in the back seat, and the doors jump out. The doors open, they jump out, and they, Erika, it's like, Daddy, give me a hug and a kiss. I give her a hug and a kiss. And I turned to say goodbye to Alex, and I was like, she's in the school.
Gone.
It's like,
Very independent.
I love you too.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. So they're just hardwired, all different. I would say about Erika, and I don't want to spend too much time on
it's great.
talking about
We
her.
love it.
She's
She loves
soaking
it,
it
I
in.
know.
Make this
Talk
the
about
whole
affirmation.
episode.
About Erika.
Keep going.
Kind of like a Mexican jumping bean. Like,
I can see
just kind of
that.
going from this to this to this to this to this. And I think, in retrospect, I look back now, given what I know more about you and how you've grown up and even recent discoveries about yourself that you've come to understand is it was not for lack of interest or even stick-to-itiveness. This was a girl who wanted to do absolutely everything and had challenges from time to time, sticking to anything.
Yeah.
Totally.
And so I think she actually comes by that kind of naturally. Because I think I probably would have had a similar diagnosis.
Yeah. Well, I think I've had friends who knew me, spent a lot of time with me, and then they'd come over and they'd meet my dad, and they'd literally be like, "Oh, we get it."
Right.
You and your dad are the exact same people.
Yeah.
That's funny. I wonder what people will think when they hear you say how dependent I am, because I think a lot of people, our listeners, would be like, "What?"
Think you're
and
very
agree.
independent.
I agree, of course, but yeah. Well, that was nice. I thought you were going to put me on blast. I thought you were going to be like,
No, he loves you.
Honey, honey, no.
I mean, I'm sure there's
Yeah.
one embarrassing story in there somewhere.
I don't think I embarrass easily, though.
I was going to say, Erika would probably tell them already.
I've probably already told them.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
I'm not too
Pretty much.
bothered.
No.
It's not a big deal.
No, but she's had to, grow up.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
had to persevere through some challenges in life. And that's always something to celebrate, and it leaves you not the same person.
Yeah.
And I think we got a lot of kids that, and I think not just kids, but in society in general, that have not had to press through really difficult stuff.
Yeah.
I think about my mom, right? Born in 24 in Russia, comes across as a 2-year-old, immigrates in 26, and then lives a really hard life.
Yeah.
And so now, we've lost Dad, and it's like, Mom, how you doing? Well, I've been alone before. She lost her dad died of tuberculosis when she was 17, I think.
Wow.
So she knows loss and poverty,
Yes.
living in literally a one-room house down on Avenue M way back when. And I never experienced that kind of struggle.
Yeah.
Honestly, I've lived pretty much with a golden spoon in my mouth. These guys had to endure me, but that probably wouldn't count as real.
The same level of struggle that she's gone through, right?
Yeah.
No, it's just all perspective, too. I think
Yeah.
it's like one person's heart is different than someone else's heart. But I would say that I think, talking with our grandparents and where we've been recently with our family and losing grandpa, I think there's a bit of reflection of like in terms of the actual hardships, like when this is going off tangent, but people used to have to go out and garden their garden every day because that was their food.
To be able to
And
eat.
whole water.
And
I
whole
was just going to say whole water.
or plant a field
Yeah.
with grain by hand.
Yeah.
I'm like,
A lot of hard labor in order to
Yes.
survive.
Yes.
And we don't know that anymore.
We go to a store and we go, that one or that one or that one or that one, or
Yeah.
complain when something's out of stock.
Yeah.
yeah, totally.
Totally.
Yeah.
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 Yeah,
And
which
I
is
grew
wild.
up in a household where Mom bought the distressed fruit.
Yeah.
Well,
'cause
yes.
it was cheaper.
Yeah.
And it's not that we couldn't have afforded it, because my dad had a really good job, and so it wasn't about the money. It was actually a principle
Yes.
that Mom waste not, want not. It's that good old Mennonite do more with less kind of stuff. And and so some of those lessons I don't think are being taught.
I was just going to
now.
say, I think we're severely lacking that. I think about my own child, his birthday's in October, and then Christmas, right? And just as simple as, what does Asher want for his birthday? What does Asher want for Christmas? I'm like, the child needs nothing. I'm constantly trying to be like, well, I mean, he could use this. We could use like, he wants for nothing.
Yeah.
And he plays with none of it.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Give him a stick and send him outside and he's happy, right? Like kids don't know, but we as parents, I think, are like, oh, we need to do this and this and this and this. Speaking for myself, obviously, but it's really putting that into perspective, wants and needs.
Yeah,
Totally.
you know, I little story here. Get used to it.
I love a story.
In my early days, so I was a teacher. I was in education for 34 years.
Well done.
Yeah, well, no, I thoroughly enjoyed that whole enterprise, and I think it's really important work. I think there's a lot of unsung heroes in that field, and just a big shout out to my teachers. And truth be told, I had a wonderful educational experience. I have so many teachers that I look up to and that I modeled my career after. But I was involved, and I got involved early in sort of the politics side of education. So getting involved in the Teachers Association and that kind of stuff. And I can remember second year I was elected to a position. So I'm at a meeting with the Board of Education. And it was, you know, sort of these representative teachers meeting with the board, having a nice meeting, you know. And I remember the chair was asking a question, and he looked across the table at us and he said, so he was quite concerned about kids. And at that time there was some pretty crazy bush parties going on, some wild stuff happening down by the river.
You wouldn't know anything about that.
No.
What's a
but
bush party? No, I'm just
well, let me
kidding.
tell you.
I'm just kidding. I'm well versed.
I think it's called shubbles or something like that. And if you know that word, then you have some splaining to do. I'm telling you. Anyway, yeah. If any of your listeners know about that, they should write in.
We
Tell their stories.
Yeah.
We want to hear it.
Anyway, so this chair, he was rather distressed at what was happening with kids, and the question he said is, so, not exactly the wording, but it's something to the effect of, so kids, like, they're worse than they used to be, right? And I didn't know to keep ait at that time. I was early in my career, hadn't learned a few things yet, and I just shot out and I said, no, sir, I don't think the children are any worse. I think it's the parents.
I think you nailed it though back then, but
yeah, and because honestly, I mean, kids will be kids.
Yes.
When they do stuff wrong, that's kind of like what they're hardwired to do.
Yeah.
If they were only ever doing what they were supposed to do, why would they need the parents?
Yeah.
They wouldn't.
No. So when they screw up, that should actually be what you would expect. When they do something like wonderful, you would go, oh, you are wonderful. You are like, and celebrate that. Because I can tell you a story about Grandpa and checkers. Do you want to hear that one?
Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
And then we got to ask you some other questions.
All right.
But
So
go ahead.
last one before you get to
Okay.
actually direct these things. But this is good.
And Milton, I knew
thought
Milton
you
would
were
like
driver's
conducting
seat.
an
Milton.
interview, did you?
Taking
Okay, sorry.
the reins.
Did you guys want to go for coffee and I can just carry on for a while? Oh,
I'm
sorry.
here for it.
Oh,
I
I
just-
know. It's
We
so
love
good.
Dad.
It's
Yeah.
so good.
Dad
I'm sorry.
stories.
Okay, it is what it is, right?
Go, checkers. Tell us. Grandpa checkers. I want to hear it.
So my son, in whom I am most proud, not most, like more than
I
you,
know.
of course, you know,
Yeah,
I'm
of course,
proud of my
of course,
son.
of course.
So we would spend time at Grandpa's place, and Theo would be playing checkers with Grandpa, and at one point, Theo is trying to win the game, obviously, and my wife. So another shout out to this very wise woman who agreed to spend her life with me. Walks by to watch, and Grandpa turns to Kelly and says, "What have you been teaching your son? Because he's trying to cheat here." And Kelly turns to Grandpa and says, "Dad, you don't have to teach them to cheat. That comes naturally. It's our job to teach them how not to."
Yeah.
That's so wise.
I think that's very accurate.
Wow.
Yeah, because you don't have to teach bad behavior. It kind of just happens,
It does.
right?
Well, they're trying to find ways around things. That's their brains getting creative.
Well, sure.
Right.
Totally.
That's so wise.
I'm like, Okay, so I'm going to circle back and I'm going to pivot now because in our intro, which you wouldn't have heard, but we've introduced you, you know, and well, you've mentioned it, right? That you've spent 34 years.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
In the teaching industry, which is amazing.
Yeah.
And so we have a very selfish question
Fire
that we
away.
want to ask you. And we're curious, right? Like we obviously operate in a team dynamic. And so we want to know what are some tips on navigating team dynamics?
Yeah.
Like how do you approach that? And even like conflict and problem solving.
So how are things going?
Oh, yeah, I literally said we're bringing
We
my dad up.
debated having
we
a therapy
debated.
session.
Yeah, we did.
No,
We probably still could.
I think, you know, when we thought of bringing you on, I was like, a lot of the nuggets I say on this podcast, I'm like, that's my dad. But also I'm like, I think people really want to hear about how to communicate. And I am getting to a place where I'm like, a lot of relationship breaks down, family dynamics, work, you know, related relationships, I think really comes down to communication. I think that's something you're very good at. And so, yeah, kind of off of what CJ said, like, we're curious.
Sure.
Like team dynamics, like you've worked in them, you've led them before,
And
you
you've
were a principal, you were a
mediated
teacher,
them.
like, yeah,
Sure.
you've done a
Okay.
lot of that.
Well, I think there's a really important disclaimer to start with.
Okay.
Great.
And that all of this stuff that I share doesn't work at home. Okay, just straight up.
Okay, this is workplace.
This
as
is
soon
workplace.
as you're family, it changes everything.
Right.
It really does, because
Okay.
the buy-in into the relationship is completely different. Like we're blood here, right? That's different than we're colleagues or we're contractually associated in some sort of way. So I think you got to sort of temper your expectations. It's not that these rules and principles don't apply. It's just that when I get home, it's like, you know, the evil Milton shows up.
Okay.
And
I wouldn't say evil.
well, it's like, you know, the best guy probably gave, you know, his best at work, and so
Right.
took a while to recover at home.
That's fair.
So anyway, so I think what I would start with is, and to be clear, I don't have any new knowledge here. I have read a ton. I've observed a lot of things. So what I would share is stuff I've kind of picked up over the years. And I guess I would start with probably know thyself. So, you know, there's all kinds of opportunities to do, whether it's the Enneagram thing or Myers-Briggs, or, I mean, there's other things. And I think it is important to do some self-reflection and to say, so what are the things about me that other people will notice? And be aware of that. So I think that whole self-awareness, I mean, there's some serious maturity that's required for that. And I was in a conversation with someone the other day in my HR role, and they opened up by disclosing a characteristic or sort of what they're known for. And it was something that could have been seen as a negative thing. So, and they were open to understanding more about how they could moderate a particular pattern of behavior that that they saw was potentially problematic. So I think there is, you know, an opportunity to know thyself, but I think doesn't matter how many of these little surveys or things that you're going to do, you will never get it all until you get it from others. And so when we interview people, we'll often ask people like, so what do others say about you? And, you know, if you don't know that, you maybe should.
That's
like,
interesting.
What do people think about you?
Well, I think we have blind spots.
Well,
Do we not? Right? We
Of
walk around
course.
thinking this is what people think of us, and we don't stop and go, okay, but like, what are other people perceiving from their angle and their perspective? And that's powerful.
Absolutely. So there's a thing called Johari's window, which you can Google later, but it's, you know, a little matrix thing, and it shows these boxes where there's stuff that you know about yourself that nobody else knows. Right? Those are secrets.
Right.
There's stuff that we know about you that you don't know.
Yep.
And that's some kind of an unknown, right?
Yep.
It's a blind spot.
Yeah.
We all know about it, but you don't. Well, do you want to know about it? I guess it depends, doesn't it? What's the nature of the relationship? Because maybe you don't care what somebody else thinks about you, knows about you. I mean, if there's, you know, it could be something inconsequential, but the idea about actually being aware of and open to reducing the size of the box of the blind spot. I I mean, there could be things that you don't know about yourself and we don't know about you either. For example, an as yet undiagnosed condition,
Right.
right? You got cancer, you got something nobody knows.
Yeah.
So it's an unknown to everybody. But I would want to be able to reduce to the greatest extent possible the unknown about me, like know thyself.
Right.
And I think not necessarily to, and to go into some kind of transformation, because I don't think that's what it is. I think it's about, first of all, I believe deeply that we are hardwired for success. I'm a person of faith, and I believe in a creative God who actually intended for you to be hardwired the way you are. Like, of all the choices of eye color and height and design and whatever, there's a reason why you are created like you are, and it's for a purpose. I'm absolutely convinced of that. So no creator, no inventor creates a tool that is without purpose. And it breaks the heart of the creator to see the tool that they use misused. I mean, any carpenter who sees a guy like me pick up a really good chisel and use it as a screwdriver. What? What are you doing? So find your, who you are. I think it starts with that. And so when I've done work with staffs, there's a little session I do. I can't remember the title. I always make up a new one because I can't remember the last one. But it's something like...
It's so accurate.
And my title is today.
We're going to just make this up
Milton
here today.
has so many sessions. Have you read his bio? It's the same one
Over and over, just rename.
I've got one shtick.
We're here for it.
But it's this, how to deal with the jerks on your team, and start by holding up a mirror. Because you're somebody else's jerk.
Okay.
Like, hello.
Right.
That's so good.
Please look at the video.
You are. We are.
Yeah.
Right?
That's
and
so true.
So I
My
started with...
systems are somebody's jerk.
Yes.
True.
We love you for your systems, but we
Also
don't understand
hate
it.
Yeah,
This is
seriously.
great.
Hey friends, it's Erika here. As you may know, my family and I recently sold our house and bought the family farm. And now we're living in constant renovations, and that's just a whole nother story for a different day. When we decided to move, I was not looking forward to walking through the process of selling our home. You can just ask Nick about it. I was dreading it. But then I met Lacey. Lacey Cossette is an award-winning Saskatoon realtor who prides herself in being your one-stop shop for both buying and selling. She is super passionate about helping her clients find their forever home, and honestly, it shows up when you meet her. Lacey was fun, energetic, listened to our needs, and when the time came for negotiations, well, I'm just really happy she was in my corner. With over 12 years in the industry and a 98% list-to-sale ratio, Lacey finds the best individual approach and plan for her clients, including extensive and personalized market strategies. And we all know that is more important now more than ever. Along with her husband and partner, Kyle Berneski, Lacey is licensed in residential, commercial, and farm. So she literally has you covered no matter what real estate area you need. And she has built solid and long-standing relationships within the industry so she can dial up the best lawyers, mortgage brokers, appraisers, contractors, whatever you guys really need. If you want a driven, hardworking, and connected agent who will go above and beyond for you, this is a no-brainer, my friends. Get in touch with Lacey. You can find her at Realty Executive Saskatoon, on socials at Lacey Cossette. That's at LACEYCOSSETTE, and online at laceycossette.com. And don't worry, friends, we will link all of her stuff in the show notes in case you're driving and you can't click right now.
And I think, and so along with that, you're going to come to understand yourself and come to appreciate what you're good at and what you're not good at. And I think if you're working as a team, how about we try and find some complementary team members? I had the benefit of, in the last school where I was a principal, I was sort of parachuted into that school. So I didn't know anybody in the building. And they assigned me a new vice principal as well. So his name was Scott. And in almost every aspect, we were opposite. And for the first month or so, we struggled a little bit until we came to understand it's kind of like the yin and the yang. And, when I was sort of, I needed someone because I'd be a little wishy-washy on some things, and I needed someone with a backbone, and he would help me stand tall. Right. And there were times when, we'd have a situation with a student, and we're gonna have to discipline or maybe even expel a student, and we'd come to a decision, and he'd want to throw the book at him, and it's like he needed me to help soften that. So judgment, mercy, those things got to come together into some kind of a blend. And I'll tell you, we spent 5 years together. It was the best team working relationship I've ever had. Wow. To this day. Like, Scott, if you're out there, I should send you this somehow. But I love that man. I really do. He taught me so much about being gracious with another person who is not like me. Like, you don't have to be the same to really hit it out of the park.
Right.
So, back to your team question, do a bit of an assessment. Like, what are your strengths and how are they complementary? So that you're not into some weird kind of competition, because there ought to be a cooperating, complementary building up of one another and celebrating the differences within this team. What's his name? Ruth Graham Bell. No, Ruth Graham. Yes, Billy Graham's wife. She said, when asked about, how she was the same or different from Billy Graham, she said, well, we're very different, which is a good thing, because if we were always the same, or the two of us were always the same, one of us wouldn't be necessary.
Yeah.
So, and I've listened to your podcast. I thought I should do that before getting here.
We appreciate that.
Yeah. And, Meredith made me cry too.
Yeah. She made a lot of people cry.
Yeah, that was a hard
that was hard.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
But it's obvious to me that what you three bring into this space are complementary skills, attributes. And it's not just skills either. It's like hardwiring.
Right.
That when you come to appreciate that. Ken Blanchard wrote the book, The 1 Minute Manager. It's a classic.
Yes, I read that years ago.
There you go. Old school. Yeah. So he also, I heard him a number of years ago, and he talked about supervision and evaluation of staff. And, you sit down with a staff member and you say, okay, we're going to go over your strengths and weaknesses. Okay. And what the employee then has to focus on is all of this weakness. And the general idea is, well, you should improve your weaknesses. That's stuff that you're bad at. And I remember Ken Blanchard saying, look, you're going to sit down with that person, identify all the stuff they're bad at. They're going to work really hard at it. And in 6 months, you're going to meet with them again. And you know what you're going to find out? That all they'll ever get to is not bad.
Right.
So how about we find a way to shift the not bad, the bad stuff, like reallocate those responsibilities and have this person actually work on what they're really good at.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, job satisfaction, production goes up. If you have the luxury of making these accommodations for people.
Right.
But finding the right fit, the right work, the right occupation, the right team, it's about teaming. And I would just say start there. Who are you? Who's on your team? Get some understanding and appreciation for your differences.
Wow.
So I think that kind of diversity is awesome.
Lean into your strengths.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you've done the work or read the book of Strengths Finder, and I can't remember who the author is, but there's this book, Strengths Finder, and you do this survey, and it'll give you your top 5 strengths of like 50 or something like that, and then a little write-up about each of them. And I did it in a corporate workplace years ago, but it was really interesting to see I think we had a team of 7 or 8, like who had complementary strengths and who had completely different strengths. And then it was decided what their pillar was within the company.
Yeah.
So it was really interesting. That's what it reminds me of.
Well, and you said the thing about obviously the workshop you have where you look in the mirror with the jerk in your... and so I'm actually curious now, when there is actually a jerk in, and this is not our team, but I'm just curious, when there is someone who's not working well with others and you're a manager.
Yeah.
How do you navigate those conversations? Like, what does that look like? Like, how do you openly communicate with someone?
Yeah. Well, I think it starts with, so St. Francis of Assisi, he starts with, seek first to understand before seeking to be understood. There is something always that motivates behavior. Years ago, I was at a middle years conference, and I think it was Gary Hellard who was the speaker. He used to run EGADS downtown in Saskatoon, sort of a youth support program. And he was talking about misbehavior of youth, and he said, don't ask why. So in my world, it's like you come into the classroom, there's a kid, standing on the teacher's desk, jumping up and down. It's like, it actually doesn't matter why you're on the desk. Get off the desk. Well, maybe it does. If there's alligators on the floor, there could be some reason, right?
Lava? What about lava?
Well, yeah.
Lava
is a real thing in our house, right? I got a 6-year-old.
But the point being, if you ask someone why they're misbehaving, they will immediately move to a defensive posture where they will try to rationalize and make it like give a good reason why I'm doing. Well, I'm doing this because of some. Well, we don't really know why. But I would start by saying, well, don't ask the why if there really isn't an obvious, reasonable explanation for this. Like misbehavior is misbehavior. But getting back to how do you start this thing? You start by making observations. So we're going to sit down with someone who's, maybe there's a conflict. Maybe there's something that's happened, but could be a misunderstanding. It doesn't matter what it is. You have to start by being a really good observer. What have you seen? What have you observed? And I can come up to you and say, first of all, can we talk? Most people will agree to that. That's not too offensive. And I've got to add another piece to this. No secrets, no surprises. You call someone to a meeting, they need to know the purpose of the meeting. They need to know who's going to be at the meeting.
Yes.
It's the worst when someone's like, can you come in and at this time and we'll have a chat? Yeah. You're immediately like I am getting fired. I'm whatever. It's an awful state of anxiety.
If you want to have a productive conversation, be transparent. Start there. And people will come to trust you over time when they realize you're not trying to sneak one in on them. You're not trying to sabotage them. You're wanting to actually understand. So we sit down and we say, may I make an observation?
You know who says that to me a lot?
We
Your
both
daughter.
know.
Your daughter.
All the time. It's great.
She's a good girl.
Yeah.
But it works because most of us have unless you're a narcissist where you don't care what other people think. Yeah. Most of us care what others think of us. So we start with, would you like to know what I've observed? And it's more than broccoli in your teeth, right? Yeah. It's something of substance. So here's what I saw. And the follow-up question is, can you help me understand? What was going on? And as much as possible, avoid ever trying to define or judge what you've seen. So in the world that I came from, I would hear people say, well, this person yelled at me. I said, well, never use the word yell. Don't use the word bully either. Just describe the behavior. So was the person speaking loudly to you? So I could, there's ways to rank what loud and assertive voice sounds like. So if you and I were in an office, would someone in the hall outside with the door closed, would they have been able to hear that we were talking? That's one level. Could they have understood what we were saying? That's another level. If we're in the gymnasium and you're at one end and I'm at the other, could I have heard what you were saying? Well, no, it was a whisper. Well, no, I could have heard. They were how loud was it?
Right.
So do as much as you can to be as objective as possible. It's what you saw. If there was a camera on, this is what I saw. This is actually what I observed. It's using that scientific method to then just say, this is what I saw. The subtext is, I saw this. I'm ready to conclude or jump to a conclusion about your motive. I don't know your motive, but with what I've seen so far, I'm thinking like you're a jerk, or you're
Right.
you're mean, or you're dumb, or you're something, right?
Yeah.
But we first want to find out, so what was actually going on?
Right.
So help me understand, like what was happening? What happened before this? Because the incident itself is not usually the whole story.
Yeah.
What led up to this? And we know, like, how are things at home? You'll eventually get to that conversation.
Right. Yep.
Like, you don't think that matters.
Yeah.
So this conversation, can we talk? I'd like to share with you an observation that I've made about you. And they're going to go, oh my, what's that all about? It's about me. And then you let them talk. So help me understand, like, what happened? And then ask probing questions. And it's okay to say, like, why within that conversation when, but even better than why, it's like, so what led to that? What brought you to that place? And another stem that you can use is just simply, tell me more. Tell me more. I used to have kids come in. So students, because they're pretty innocent for the most part, and they don't know you're kind of playing games. But
Nicky.
yeah, well, you know, I mean, so when a kid's misbehaving or something's happened, and you know somebody knows, right?
Right.
But who done it? We don't know who done it. So you bring a kid in, you don't know if they done it or not, but you bring them in, and you don't ask them, did you do it? You say, tell me what you know about this. And then all of a sudden they start talking because it's a question they didn't anticipate, for one thing.
Right.
And it wasn't even a question. It was a directive. Tell me what you know about this. And the follow-up was, who else should I talk to? So bringing back to like adults, because you can't do that with adults. But we're in this world, but you can do it with your kids. But in this place where, you know, you're going to try and understand, and you can't fake that.
Yeah.
Do not try and fake care, because they'll read you like a book, and you will they will disqualify anything that you've had to say. You genuinely have to care.
Yeah.
So, another story?
Yeah.
Okay. This
I'm
leads-
like literally on the edge of my seat.
I know.
I
It's
know.
good. It's
I'm
so
like,
good.
where's my notepad?
Yeah,
I'm
no,
ready
no.
to listen
Well,
to this one back.
Just hit rewind,
Yeah.
and then, it's all good.
Many
No, it's-
times will I listen to this.
No,
Yes.
I did, really. So there's another really good book. Man, who wrote this one? Oh, I think this one's by Ken Blanchard as well. It's called Whale Done. Whale, killer whale,
Okay.
right? There was a whole series of books written in the late 90s, early 2000s, these leadership books. Patrick Lencioni, Ken Blanchard, they're some of my favorite. But they would write what was sort of like a modern day parable and sort of tell you a story. So you're reading the story, but you're getting all the leadership lessons in it. And at the end, for those of us who didn't quite catch on, he kind of says, okay, here's what we're telling you. Do this, do this, do this. It's really good. So he tells a story about a guy in management. He goes down to Florida, he sees SeaWorld, and he watches the killer whales, and they're doing all these amazing things. And then near the end of the show, the guy jumps into the water with the killer whale, and they do these amazing things. And they give these killer whales like little fish. So the guy's going, how do you do that? Like, how do you train a killer whale? So he goes down to the edge of the pool afterwards. Everybody's left. The trainer's still there. And he gets the guy's attention. And he just asks the question, how do you train a killer whale? And the guy looks up and he says, well, the first thing you have to teach a killer whale is that you mean it no harm.
Oh.
Wounded puppy,
Right.
Yeah.
student,
Yes.
colleague, someone you supervise, someone you have authority over. If they don't believe first that you're for them and not against them, stay in your office till you've proved first that you mean them no harm.
That is
I
so
think-
human.
Well, and but I think that's a really missing piece, because I think so many people don't care about who they're working with. And then, like you said, the fake it bit is easy to read. And I think that what I like about the observation piece, if I'll speak to this for my own, because I do say it a lot in conversations. I say it a lot with my husband. I say it a lot with my kids. What I like about when you ask someone if you can make an observation, there's two things that happen. One, curiosity. And two, I feel it gives, and maybe you won't agree with this, but I feel there is now a level of, you've now chosen to enter into this observation with me. So if your reaction is to be PO'd at me, please reflect you willingly said yes. Because you can say, can I make an observation? They can go, no.
Oh, exactly.
And then it's like, well, okay, when you're ready, we'll talk. Or however that play. I've never been to that point because most people, their curiosity goes, what are you thinking?
What
And I want to hear.
say to that too is because I don't think anybody's ever said that to me before you. And like I said, she said it to me many times. I know, right? But it's like you listen with a different ear. As the person being asked that question, you're like, oh, well, right. Curiosity. Like, well, what's the observation? And it's also like my defenses would be lowered. Whereas if someone's like, why did you do that? Or like, you're ridiculous for making that decision. Coming from a place of curiosity really helps impact the person receiving the question.
Oops. I really think it is about opening the mind and the spirit to learning something new. And when you engage in that kind of, if you have that kind of a relationship where it's a sincere question or it's a sincere offer, may I make, like, really, can I share something with you?
Yeah.
Yeah. And body language matters. Let's be clear about that. I think you need to, there's all kinds of research about that, like where you sit at the board table or when you're having a meeting with someone, how to have body language support and not be a barrier to how.
So what does supportive body language look like?
So actually sitting like this, so sitting alongside, sort of triangulating as opposed to oppositional.
Like across the table.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's power in that. Actually, height, elevation matters too.
Yeah.
One of the things that I would do if we would do this in Teacherland is we'd always pay attention to the imbalance of power and influence. So if it's a person who can really make a big difference in your role and in your career, then they have more power. There's an imbalance there. And so I'm big, you're small. Well, how do we, as a leader, what can we do to diminish that power play? Because it shouldn't be about power at that point. This is about understanding. So if I'm going to have a challenging conversation with someone where I have to move from coaching someone to calibrating their behavior, coaching is that observation conversation. So here's what I'm seeing, and you get to the point where you agree on the facts. Like, can we do that, please? Can we get to the place where we agree on what actually happened and what led up to this and what the consequences of this particular thing were? Because maybe it was bad, right? And we don't want that again. And do we have shared commitment on that? So that's a coaching thing. When you get to the point where it's like, okay, we actually are going to require of you a change in your behavior, a change in your process or whatever. So we're going to like tune you in where there's a calibration that goes on. When that happens, I want somebody else in the room with you. Because I want, first of all, somebody else to bear witness to the tone, bear witness to the support that I'm trying to provide, but also bear witness to, like, we're being clear here.
Right.
Like there is a time when you have to clearly articulate the expectations, clearly let people know what the indicators of success are. Like, because they're going to try and get there. They really are. If they are an employee or a team member that is a valued team member that you want to stay there, you want their success, they want their success. I mean, you actually have a lot in common. But make sure those indicators of success and the expectations are clear. Okay, we're clear on you know what you're going to do, right? So then you have to establish a time frame. So what's a reasonable time frame for you to be able to deliver on this? And is it a growth process, or is it like, no, we need to terminate a specific behavior? So if we've got a particular behavior that has to be extinguished today, like, you can't have 6 months to improve. Sorry. Like, this really has to stop. I mean, there's a bunch of little things and big things that can be identified as those kind of.
Well, I would assume like sexual harassment is like, okay, this is done today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. If someone's like
bullying,
absolutely inappropriate behavior.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you got to call it, name it, label it, and make it abundantly clear what the expectation is. Like, no wishy-washy here. And here's another little tip. It's called the echo email or the echo conversation. So after you've had the chat, if you're the one who had the meeting, called the meeting, you're the first one. And I call it a +10.
Okay.
Take 10 minutes after the meeting and write down what was the big chunks of what the meeting was about. So thank you for meeting with me today, where we discussed this, this, and this, and where we agreed, whatever the agreements were, boom, 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 boom. And and the bottom line is, if I have misunderstood or miscommunicated, if I got any of this wrong, please let me know. So you put the onus on the other individual. They're going to read it and they're going to go, yep, that's what we agreed to. Or heck no, that's, I didn't understand it like that.
Hey everybody, it's Erika. As you may know by now, I absolutely love starting businesses and talking all things entrepreneurial with everybody that I can. So listen up if you have a similar mindset to me. Are you possibly looking to start your own side hustle? If you love getting creative and want to make products that are always in demand, you need to check out BNB Craft Supplies. Owned and operated in small town Saskatchewan, BNB Craft Supplies is North America's largest supplier of specialty silicone beads. How cute is that that's right here in our own province? All of their products are, listen up, BPA free, PVC free, 100% non-toxic, and made of food-grade silicone and all natural, locally sourced wood, which means you can feel good about your babies like chewing on them and playing with them. It's perfectly safe. As a new mom, founder and creator Jade fell in love with making silicone teethers as her creative outlet. Because of this, she built a thriving business, and when it became difficult to source the quality supplies that she wanted, she took matters into her own hands and became the supplier. You know we love this for her. B&B offers hundreds of bead options with no minimums. And you guys, when I say hundreds, I mean it. I have seen her warehouse. It is stock full of so many great options, patterns, colors, you name it, she has it. This means you can create for yourself, your friends, or start a business, and Jade is always there to help you every step of the way. Get creative and get support from a wholesaler who's there for you. Visit B&B Craft Supplies on Instagram. Listen up, it's B_and_B_craft_supplies to get inspired. And then head over to bnbcraftsupplies.ca to shop hundreds of bead and teether options. Again, that's bnbcraftsupplies.ca to shop hundreds of bead and teether options.
Right. And so then you can go back, because you want to actually have clear and be on the same page. Yeah. Even if it's a difficult page.
Yeah.
Let's make sure even more so, right? If it's a hard thing, boy, we'd better be sharing the same understanding of what those expectations are.
I'm curious how you can, because you spoke about that in a work setting. Mm-hmm. I'm curious how you would tailor that idea to children.
Well, I don't know that it's a whole lot different. I mean, I think it's about
he's 6 years old.
Awesome.
He's so fun, so smart. I've always said, and then maybe this is incorrect language, but I could have never been able to lie to get him to do something, you know, like how we spoke about tricking the children or using, right? That. He's constantly like, no, I got this, right? Like, I know what you're doing. So it's, I'm curious with a really intelligent child who is also very emotional, very empathetic, and very strong-willed, shall we say. How can you tailor conversations to, children that will understand?
We are generally hardwired to come to a problem with one of two questions. It's either a how or a why.
Right.
And find out what your kid will ask first. So, for example, there's a situation that is causing a problem. I mean, the classic example in teacher land was our staff meetings are brutal.
Right.
They're too long. Yeah, everybody hates staff meetings, stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
So you put that question. So here's the problem. And some people will first go to their first question will be, how can we make this better? And then there's another set of people will say, why are we having staff meetings?
Right.
Find out, what is the first question your kid asks? Is it a why? Do they usually ask why? Or do they ask how? How do I do this?
It's a why.
So you'd better address that first.
Right.
Because the why is what helps them embrace whatever the change is, that understanding. And I think we undersell the capacity of kids to really like to read us.
Yeah.
They read you like a book.
Totally.
Like my kids, they knew, And that's body language stuff. Like there's all kinds of stuff we're communicating. But I do think it's about really clear expectations. One of the things with children that we can't count on in the same way as we do with adults is the whole emotional moderation. That's a maturing thing. So being sad, being angry, being able to manage their emotions when they're not getting what they want, because they're pretty much, you know, up until a certain point, life is really all about them.
Yeah.
And so it's growth. And I don't know, I'd test that theory to see if the why matters more than the how, and try that path.
That's really interesting. And it's funny that you said, like, he can read you. Literally yesterday, he looked at me and he's like, that's your yes face, and that's your no face, and that's your frustrated face. And I was like, good Lord.
Well, so follow up. So why do you think I have that face?
Okay.
What do you think?
Put
You
the
know?
why back on him.
Yeah.
Why not? You know, maybe he has an answer why. Maybe he's already figured it out.
Yeah. Well, probably.
You know,
It's
there's
a blind spot.
Yeah.
So just
That's
on
interesting.
that how and why thing, another way to, I mean, and you can assess that for yourselves, but so we were living in a small town, which meant our kids, you know, had sort of the same teachers, because the teachers didn't really change. So they all ended up with Mr. Hintz, which is, shout out to Dave, where he's a great teacher. Love that guy. Retired recently. So he was science guy, math guy, history guy, right? Like he did all this cool stuff. Really like a talented man. And he taught, I think he taught both of my two eldest kids math, like senior math and that kind of stuff. And one of them appreciated his teaching more than the other. So without labeling which one of my kids that would have been, if in the math equation, one of my kids didn't care about the path, just needed to know what the path was to get the answer. I just need to know how to get the answer. And so if the teacher says, just do this, doesn't matter why, just do this, that worked great for that kid. The other kid could do it, but it drove that kid nuts that they didn't understand why.
Right.
Find out what your path of learning is.
How and why.
And when you go, you know, your kid's struggling with a particular teacher, find out if the teacher is a how or a why teacher.
Wow.
With certain content.
Oh, that's interesting.
This is so interesting.
And to the teachers who might be listening, yeah, it's not a luxury for you to stay in one way of teaching.
Yeah.
You got to find a way to help the why kid and the how kid get to the answer, so that they actually have confidence in what they're doing, what they're learning.
That's very interesting. I like that. I never thought of that before. Can you speak to a little bit, because I feel like we've talked about this, and I think this is an interesting thing in the social media world with like bullying. And I think we've had my own fair experiences in my own growing up situations, but I'm wondering if you can speak to how to deal with bullies.
Oh boy. Just had a conversation with a guy last night about this. I think, well, first of all, whenever we use the word bully, it just like shoots things. It goes nuclear, right? You're being a bully, and it's like, well, what is that really?
Yeah.
Are they being excessively assertive, or are they being like mean? Like, what is the behavior? Get back to what are we observing? What is the actual behavior that is causing the problem? So because I would, you know, in my work, I would have people say, well, this person is bullying me. And I would just say, well, okay, fair enough. That's actually a judgment on behavior that has been observed or experienced. So let's do the best we can to set aside the term bullying, because it's so loaded, right?
Very, very loaded.
But I do think bullying is, it's an expression that it's a means of communicating in a very effective way and in an inappropriate way. So how do I frame this? So there's different types of bullying. There's physical, there's verbal. Both of those are actually languages. And I would say you have to respond to the bully or to the inappropriate way, the inappropriate behavior, in the same language as how it is delivered. A physical bully will not respond to words.
Okay.
Sorry, teachers, principals, all of you out there. Like, you might not like this piece, but I'll tell you, the kid on the playground that's pushing kids around needs someone to push them around again, like push them back.
Right.
Because that's their language. This is how they are experiencing and expressing themselves. So when you think about how someone's expressing, if you don't speak the same language, they're not going to understand. It's maybe different language. So the whole, just say no. No, I've been that principal that can't endorse violence. But here's a story for you. I had a colleague come to me totally frustrated because the situation in school was not good. I think their son was in grade 5. And this is, I don't want to, it's not like throwing the school or the teacher or the principal on the bus. Most of this stuff happens unseen by adults.
Yes. Yeah.
Right?
Children have a way of keeping that.
Well, but there's always an audience.
Yes.
With bullying. There's almost always an audience.
Right.
Sometimes there's not, but more often than not there is. And it's a power play for sure. And so you have to find a way to balance the power. And if it's physical power, you'd better find a way to balance the power. Like, you actually have to do that if you're going to stop the bully from causing the harm. And maybe the balance is by having someone else with you, or it's, some other mechanism of doing that. So this colleague comes to me just like choked. There was a kid literally stealing her son's lunch, like picking on him, hurting him, like nasty stuff. And they had gone through the steps, talked to the teacher, talked to the principal. And it was really a nonviolent intervention philosophy that they were trying to use in that school. And I get that. I understand that, but it has not, in my mind, produced the kinds of results that I think we were hoping for in education. So I said, here's what you do. You teach your kid that he's going to have to communicate in the same language. So if it's a physical push, there's going to have to be one back. I was like, she looked at me and thought, really? I said, yeah, be prepared for your kid to get kicked out of school for a day or two.
Yeah.
It's going to happen, but it'll be worth it. So you're going to teach your kid how to stand his ground. He's going to make a fist, and he's going to bop him in the nose. These are little kids, right? Like, nobody's going to get, dead here.
Right.
Right? So this is going to be an assertive communication in the same language that's coming at him. Right? Now I can just hear all this, are you kidding? You're endorsing violence.
No,
Well,
I'm here for
I don't
it.
know.
I feel like I've heard so many dads say, hit them back.
Well,
You know what I mean?
I think the thing is, and I can appreciate this entirely. I think what you're trying to communicate, or maybe not, what I'm picking up is, I understand why in a school we can't endorse violence. Like, I understand this. I understand the principal can't sit there and say to the kid that just got punched, go punch them back. Because now you as a teacher are allowing violence, and what does that domino effect into?
Yeah.
Which I think is wise when you have someone outside to say, this is what I would do.
Yeah.
And again, I think, I will I have told my child before, the next time they do that, you do it right back. And I've said, this is what will happen. You might get in trouble. That's fine. You might go to the office, I say, and then tell them to call my mom.
Yeah. And that's the other
Call
piece.
my mom.
Right.
You need to get ready to accept the consequences of this behavior. And I think that's the piece that in my mind, makes this an appropriate response.
Right.
So kid's going home one day, the bully comes along, accosts him on the street, and this young kid does exactly what he's been coached to do. And it was a struggle for this kid too. Like, his mom told me, it's like, really? Am I supposed to hit him? And she says, well, just pop him in the nose. That's all. Because a nose is great, eh? Makes you cry,
Yep.
right? Oh, that hurts.
You feel it.
Right? It's that's a power neutralizer right there, right? And they're not going to die.
Yeah.
You're going to pop them in the nose, but be prepared, because maybe this kid will light up and fight back.
Right.
But fair enough. Then get ready to run. Right. So you coach your kid. You're not going to be stupid about this.
Yeah.
And so that's exactly what happened. Popped him in the nose. The kid, he grabbed his lunch and he left. Never had another problem. And this parent, if she's listening, she will write in and she will tell you the name of her kid, who it was a life-changing moment for that kid.
Wow.
And it just changed the power.
This is the part of the thing that people don't hear, is they hear, well, that person told them to punch my kid in the face.
Yeah.
And it's like, Well, first of all, if your kid is being like, if your kid is the one who's being punched in the face because of behavior, again, this is where I go, parents, what's going on here? But I'm like, this is the part of the story that goes, you can actually have impact by sometimes stepping outside of the norm of what people would typically tell you to do.
Well, it's, I think there's some debate too about how do we define violence as opposed to assertive behavior that is in a language that is physical. Question that one. But I didn't finish all of that story about that kid. That, the principal found out, called the kid in, suspended him for 2 days.
Yeah.
And I told the parent, you go for ice cream.
Yeah.
Like this is about honoring, that very difficult thing that this kid did.
Yeah.
And I know the other parents would have been, well, that's not fair. Yeah, fair enough. It's not fair, but let's talk about what's been going on. So, hopefully that kid learned. Both of them did.
Yeah.
But I know, in the society that we have now, where there's not enough acknowledgement of responsibility for behavior. And it's not just kids. Like, who are we kidding?
Yeah.
Where do you think kids learn this
Seriously.
from?
Yeah.
Hello?
No, I think you dropped some really, that's really good. I love the bully conversation. And when I say bully, I mean bully, right? That traditional sense of the word, which is, I feel like when I think of the word bully, I think like unrelenting,
Right.
without reason,
Harassment.
style
Do you
behavior.
think then if you have these types of conversations earlier on in life that it could stop that behavior from possibly, building momentum and continuing forward in their bullying pattern, let's say?
Yeah, I think so. Because
we're not dealing with issues early,
Yeah.
right? When we can just bop them in the nose and then all of a sudden now they're like, bodybuilders and like it's a different story. I'm like, are we not dealing with issues?
Yeah.
I'm really concerned about this podcast and where it's going. I just gotta tell you, like that's.
Milton leaves and we're all bopping each
no.
other.
Erica will make sure our boxing gloves are pink.
Yes.
Well, I think it starts at a very young age. How to teach your child to be assertive
Right.
without being aggressive, and how to stand, like to draw a line and to know what is good behavior and what is appropriate and how to call it out. And I think we don't start by bopping someone in the nose. We start by calling out bad behavior. You give people a chance to do this. But how is this any different than, say, global conflict? How do these things develop over time? And then what does bullying at the state level look like? Are we not sort of observing some of that in our world today?
Yeah.
Right.
So, if you don't stand up to it, you'll get pushed over by it. I'm
Yeah.
absolutely convinced.
Yeah.
So, little people, I think it can start there.
Yeah.
I'm not a child psychologist and an expert on those things, but
Yeah.
But
makes
you
me think.
raised 4 kids who can, and I'll share, I'm looking at the time. I think we have a little bit of time. I'm going to share one of my favorite Milton advice moments for me. I was in grade 10 and I was dealing with a teacher who was, I won't use the word bully, but picking on me. And this teacher was notoriously known for this. And it would be like 2 students in each class who I have spoken to are like, I was that student. Like, it was very notorious. And I was dealing with a teacher who was, what I observed was being very unfair to me, not very kind, embarrassing me in front of my class, making me feel very, very small. And I came home one day and I was asking, I think I was probably venting about it. And I was like, I don't really know what to do about this because it feels really unfair. And I don't know how to communicate because I'm a kid and like, they're my superior, they're my teacher, they're grading me. Like, how do you like be assertive? So my dad gave me some advice. So the next day in school, I'm sitting there and I'm sitting and visiting with friends, and all of a sudden I'm now a target and I'm being, made fun of, and it was not nice. And I just
singled out.
Thank you. I was singled out, and I calmly stood up and I said, I actually don't have to take this behavior from you. This is actually not appropriate the way you're speaking to me right now. And I packed up my books and I went out to the hall and I sat down right outside the door. And he poked his head out and he said, what was that? And all I said is, my dad told me to say that to you. And he nodded and shut the door.
And he knew.
And I remember the key that Dad said is, but you have to say, like, I'm not actually going to take this crap from you. Like, this is actually inappropriate. You're publicly embarrassing me in front of my class, so I'm going to publicly say back, I will not take this behavior anymore. And then my dad said, but you have to just sit right outside the room and do your work. You can't go run amok around the school. Like, you have to prove that this is still that piece of ownership of saying, I'm not going to now go and march around and be like, I stood up to this teacher. Nope. It was still just I'm going to sit here and do my work. And I didn't deal with him again.
Wow.
Yeah. And I think that's meeting someone with the language they're speaking. Right. And I that's one of my favorite things I learned. And it helped me in later years with more teachers because I had some problems with them.
Well, but this speaks to, I think, what accountability looks like.
Yeah.
And so when I was a principal, I had, from time to time, we'd have kids that just lost it, right? They dropped an F-bomb or they were like angry people. And by the way, that's like normal now. I mean, I think it's brutal, some of the stuff that teachers are exposed to. And I have a tremendous amount of respect for what teachers are standing in on behalf of our society and the kids that are showing up every day. But I was able to say public offense requires a similar public redress. So you lose it in front of the class and you swear at your teacher, you have it's an affront to the authority, this God-given authority through the state, to the school, to the teacher. You have offended everyone. You're not getting back into that class until you make it right in front of everyone.
Well, because there's too much easy, like, well, I'll go apologize behind the scenes. And now all these kids are like, well, we didn't see any of that.
Disgrace.
Yeah.
No, it's because what's happened is the assault on the authority is felt by everyone.
Yeah.
It has diminished this. And so I had one kid in particular who, and you know, there's all kinds of reasons why kids lose it. And there was lots going on in this kid's life. But what he said to the teacher in front of everybody else was like way offside. It was, you're done. You can't go back. Like, that's just, sorry. Those kind of statements, that's not on. And so he was mad and angry and he left. And I says, but if you ever want to come back, you know, here's the path to return. You're going to stand in front of the class with that teacher there and you're going to ask that teacher's forgiveness.
Yeah.
There's a word we don't use often.
Yes.
But so a year later, this kid leaves. He's only in grade 9 or grade 10 and like too young to be out of school. But he is messed up. He spends a year pumping gas. He comes back to me in the fall with his guardian, his parent, and says, I want to come back to school. I said, well, what have you learned in this last year? He says, well, I learned I don't want to pump gas for a living. And I said, okay, so you remember the deal? And he says, yes. I said, are you prepared to do that? He said, yes. I said, okay. I talked to the teacher. I said, you willing to go through with this? He said, sure. Credit to the teacher.
Yeah.
So we did it. Brought the kid in. He stood in front of the entire class, acknowledged what he did. Like, mess up, fess up, clean up. It's not that hard, right? So he acknowledged it. He sought forgiveness. It occurred. It was granted.
Yeah.
Kid went on. He graduated a half year after his class. We got him through. I mean, it's like a success story.
Wow.
It was awesome.
And a huge learning, big lesson for every single child that was in that class that observed that. I want to touch quickly on the forgiveness piece. So often we'll say, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But not often enough do we say, will you forgive me?
Yeah.
I started saying that to my son when I yell.
Yeah.
You know, I'm sorry, Mommy shouldn't have yelled. I'm sorry. But I started saying, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have yelled. Will you forgive me? Then he has choice in it. And he's like, yes, of course, you know, but I just noticed that the power in that shift.
You know, I'm glad you've drawn our attention to the meaning of that word, because when you ask for someone to forgive you, it means they're willing to actually pay the price of your bad behavior. So, because you can't undo it. And so they're saying, the harm that you've caused me, I get that. And I'm giving you a pass. Because you actually, most of the time, you can't actually make it right.
Yeah.
Not that time, because the damage has been done. It's for the next time. And I would also say, don't forgive too early until you're willing to actually pay the price of that other person's harm that they've done to you. Like, really?
Wow.
Well, and I think that's, I'm looking at our time here. So I'll wrap up kind of with this. My last thought on what you just said.
There's not like part two?
I think there's definitely
Trust
part
me,
two.
we want you to come back.
Seriously.
Oh, boy.
But I think the two things you just touched on, which was the don't forgive before you're ready, and also that lesson about that kid being gone for a year. I think there's something to say about time and space.
Oh, yeah.
And I think as parents, and I'm trying to do this, you know, sometimes I'll be like, go apologize to your brother.
Right.
And I'm like, they are not even. And then it's like, I'm sorry. And I'm like, you didn't mean it. You better mean it. And then they say it again.
That's
and I'm
actually what they sound like. I know
Yeah.
those
No,
kids.
yeah.
But
My
you
kid
know-
sounds the same.
like, you're like, you've now said to them, mean it. And they're like, I don't.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think there is space even, and I think maybe teachers could take a lesson from that story. That's like, hey, like you might want that student to come to you tomorrow, and they might not.
That's right.
And there is a bit of let the lesson be learned, let the space, and not just that's just because of the story, but but that was really good. That went so fast.
Like
I
way too
know.
fast because I'm like, we have so many more questions.
So many.
Oh, dear.
I know.
Okay.
We like to end with
Oh, this is going to be a doozy.
I know.
We're putting all the pressure on. No,
He's
you're
already
good,
given
you're good,
so
you're good.
much.
I know.
But
I'm like,
Screw up.
We
Okay.
like to
No.
ask people what the best piece of advice they've ever been given, or what one of the best pieces of advice they've ever been given is.
Yeah, I knew this question was coming. So do I have time for a little story?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
I
So
feel
it's
like we'll always allow Milton to tell
I know.
a story.
literally.
Yeah.
Like, don't even ask.
Yeah.
You're
We're
good.
storytellers, us blocks.
Yeah,
Yes.
I guess they blah, blah, blah. First year of teaching. It's a grade 5-6 split. And some of those kids might know who they are if you're out there. I loved teaching. I really did. I had so much fun. But anyway, so I'm in this class, and I've got these two grade 5 kids, little girl, and I mean like little. She was like a diminutive little person. Kristen was her name. And she was sharp, like really smart kid, right? And then there's a boy, his name is Heath. And he was also like sharp. These two kids were like, they were really bright kids. But it was obvious that Heath kind of was sweet on Kristen, and must have been because he was bugging her, right? That's how this works.
Yeah.
And so there was this, I was teaching a lesson, and there was something going on between these two. They sat just opposite each other. And I thought, well, I'll just, quietly go to the back of the room. And I walked up the aisle, and just in time to intercept a note that was being passed from Kirsten to Heath. And so I grabbed it, and I kept walking and turned around and looked at both of them, and their eyes are bugged out. I was like, oh, no. Anyway, I looked at this note, and I regret that I didn't bring it with me today, because I still have that note. I laminated it. And it's a small little thing, like just about the size of a sticky note, right? And it's from Kristen to Heath, and it says, I may be small, but I'm not a dirtbag.
Whoa.
This is from a kid in grade 5,
Yes.
right? And, that, I have kept that with me all these years. It's in my office right now, just behind my desk on the wall. There's this little note, and it's like, know thyself,
Yeah.
understand your value, who you are, that you are a valuable, worthwhile person, And yeah, you may be small. There may be things about you that aren't perfect. That's okay. No one intended for you to be everything, but you are something.
Yeah.
And what you're not.
Yeah.
You're not a dirtbag.
Yeah.
Oh, that's like the most perfect ending ever.
We need a photo of that.
Yeah.
I want to
so
see it.
good.
I think I have it in my phone.
Yeah.
So
I
good.
keep it close by.
That's amazing.
That was really good, Dad. I'm really glad you came.
Thank you
so
so much. Like Jinx. Yeah.
And also, I feel like we've wanted to have you on the podcast since we started. And Erika started dropping all of these, Miltonisms, I'll call them.
Yeah.
And you've provided us with so much value personally, professionally. I think our listeners are going to be obsessed with this episode. And I just want to say thank you. I've learned a lot today.
Well, it's been...
This will be on repeat for a lot of people.
Well, thanks.
Yeah, you're going to continue to
kind.
impact
Thank you.
many people.
Happy to be here.
Yeah.
Happy International Women's Day to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us on this episode of the Her Podcast. If you want to follow along with us, you can find us on Instagram and TikTok at its.her.podcast. We can't wait to see you there.
Bye.
Adios.